Hey traders, it's John Fortune here of this week's Weekly Forex Forecast for the 15th of June to the 19th of June 2020. As always, we're going to start off by looking at the US dollar index and crude oil before running through a number of markets, looking at the key levels of support and resistance in the process. I'm also going to be highlighting some of the targets that we're going to be looking for in this coming week and also for future weeks. So I hope you're having a nice weekend. Let's jump over to the charts and see where the money is this week. As always, we're going to start off by looking at the US dollar index. Now, last week we were looking for further declines to the downside in the dollar index. We started the week in this area and we were looking for a move down towards the 95.71, and we had a really nice move down towards this area before bouncing to the upside. Very simply put, going into this week, we are still looking for further declines as the downtrend in this market is still intact. What we would like to see is we've already had a pullback, but any further pullback in this area is going to be viewed as an opportunity next week to start to look for a reversal to the downside in the dollar index. And we're going to be looking down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target highlighted from last week, the 95.71. Now what this means is, as we're not looking to trade the dollar index itself, but what this means is we will go into next week with a bearish bias on the US dollar. And it means we're going to favor US dollar weakness when we look for setups in these markets next week. Now, before we move on to the next market, I do just want to point something out in terms of the US dollar this week. We did have this rally to the upside, and the reason we had this rally to the upside was because we had a big sell-off in the S&P 500. If we actually bring up the S&P 500 here, you can see there is an inverse correlation between the S&P 500 and the dollar index, and especially when we start to see panic selling coming into the S&P, and last week at the end of the week we did have this big sell-off to the downside in the S&P. This causes money to flow into the safe haven assets, the US dollar, the Swiss franc, and also the Japanese yen, in the order of Japanese yen, US dollar, and then Swiss franc. And so we do need to pay attention to the stock market going into next week as well when we're looking at the dollar, because if we get a further decline to the downside, this is not yet a reversal. In the S&P 500, this is not yet a reversal. This should be, for the meantime, just being viewed as a pullback. But if we do start to get a reversal to the downside and we do get some panic selling coming into the stock market and this reverses, we are going to see funds flowing into the dollar. So if you are going into next week with a bearish bias like we are, make sure you don't overtrade or you take too many positions in dollar weakness, because if the S&P 500 does sell off sharply and we get some panic selling coming in, you're going to see dollar strength, and any dollar weak positions may actually end up being stopped out. So we don't mind taking losing trades, but you don't want to go too heavy and take too many positions or too much risk in dollar weakness next week because of the risk of the stock market selling off further and having those inflows into the dollar as a safe haven asset. So we don't know that's going to happen for sure. It's just a risk. If we knew it was going to happen, then obviously we would be looking for dollar strength. But at the moment, we're just viewing it as a risk, and it means that we'll be limiting the positions we put in terms of dollar weakness next week. So the next market we're going to look at is crude oil. Now, last week we started the week in this area and it was right at the top of this rally. This uptrend is still intact in the near term, so what we want to see was a pullback down towards the previous broken resistance at 28.53. We have started to pull back, so any further correction in this area is simply going to be viewed as an opportunity next week to start to look for bullish patterns, so bullish breakouts to the upside. And if we get the right kind of bullish reversal patterns in this area, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 40.93. So the next market we're going to look at is euro dollar. Now, last week we started the week up in this area right at the top of this rally as well, and we really needed a breather last week in some of these markets after 2 weeks of just rallies to the upside and dollar weakness. In terms of euro dollar, we were looking last week for a pullback towards the 1.1147. We have started to pull back towards this area, so any further pullback in this area is going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to start to look for bullish setups. And if we get the right kind of bullish setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set, the 1.1495. So the next market we're going to look at is pound dollar. Now, we started the week up in this area and we were looking for a pullback towards the 1.23910, as this pullback here is what gives us the opportunity to start to look for further reversals to the upside. The uptrend is still intact in pound dollar, so this pullback is simply being viewed next week as an opportunity to start to look for bullish setups. And if we get the right kind of bullish setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set, with 1.2848. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2, at the 1.3017. So next market we're going to look at is US dollar Japanese yen. Now last week we had a reversal to the downside in this market as we started to see some panic coming into the market with that sell-off in the S&P 500. Yes, the US dollar does appreciate against other currencies when we start to see it used as a safe haven asset, but it depreciates against the yen. More money will go into the yen than the dollar, so the dollar will actually, the yen is the only currency the dollar will depreciate against if we have panic selling coming out of the stock market. So very simply put, going into next week, we are looking further declines to the downside in the US dollar yen. What we would like to see is any pullback in this area, as we're quite close to the lows down here, any pullback in this area is going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to start to look for bearish setups. And if we get the right kind of bearish setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 105.01. So next market we're going to look at is Aussie dollar. Now last week we came and took out slightly longer term target we had here at 0.70320, which was right here. And we sold off after tagging the target last week, as we would expect, because profit taking came in. This pullback now is giving us the opportunity. This pullback should be viewed next week simply as an opportunity to start to look for bullish setups. And if we get the right kind of bullish setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 0.7132. And if we can get a break through here, we're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and target 2 at the 0.7290. So next market we're going to look at is New Zealand dollar. Now last week we took out the target set of 0.65780, which was right here, and we turned pretty much to the pip, and that was the high of last week, and we started to sell off to the downside. This sell off to the downside gives us an opportunity to once again start to look for bullish setup. So any further pullback, and the deeper the better, as it gives us better risk to reward setups to our targets. But any pullback in this area is simply going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to start to look for bullish setups. And we're going to be looking at initiating longs up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 0.6643. So the next market we're going to look at is US dollar Swiss franc. Now last week we were looking further declines to the downside in this market. We started the week here and we took out both targets to the downside, and we bounced from the second target from last week at the 0.94040, which was right here. And when we hit the second target, we actually bounced to the upside. Profit taking came in, and also we saw that sell off in the stock market causing some money to flow into the US dollar. As it stands, this is not yet a reversal. Although this is steep, this is not yet a reversal, and we should still be focused on further declines to the downside in this market. Any pullback in this area, as we're already getting a nice pullback, any further pullback is simply going to be viewed as an opportunity next week to start to look for bearish setups. And we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.9319. So next market we're going to look at is US dollar CAD. Now the downtrend is still intact, and last week we were looking for a correction towards the 1.3711, which is this key of resistance, broken support from the past, looking to turn resistance to 1.3711. We did start to get this pullback, and now any pullback in this area, any further pullback, is simply viewed as an opportunity to start to look for bearish setups in this market. And if we get the right kind of bearish setups in this market, we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.3282. And last but not least, we have gold. Now last week we were looking for a pullback for reversals to the downside in this market. We did get a pullback, we didn't have any reversals, and we did actually break above the key of resistance highlighted last week. We have not taken out the major top here at the 174566, so as it stands going into next week, we are still focused on bearish setups in this market. If we can start to break down in this area going into next week, this is going to be a great place to start to look for bearish setups, as I said. And we're going to be looking at initiating shorts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1637.81. Now just bear in mind, if we actually fail to reverse in this area and we break higher above the 1745660 and we start to break out in this direction, we will not be looking for shorts if we break the 174566. This will actually be the point at which we reverse and start to take a long bias in this market. So that is it from me for this week, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing and subscribing. A big thank you to everybody who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far. I want to wish you all a fantastic week next week, and I want to wish you all a nice weekend. The only thing left to say is take care, and don't forget to trade safely.